2, 1. All right. We're back. I think.
We're back.
I think we're back. If not, we'll just pop up that. So you can tell people that we're back. So this is the Monday Night Sweat for those just tuning in. I'm your host, David Kitchen, aka Soccer Dave. Joining me, the one, the only Michael Leone. He is a stud. I mean, this guy, if there is a daily fantasy baseball competition out there, he is going to win it. Are you a little bit sad that baseball's over?
Honestly, I'm relieved for
Because of all the work
writing
that you put in?
this. Yeah, this was the first year that Drew and I, working on the fix at myfantasyfix.com, and we wrote, I'm not sure what, 6 months, so something like 180 days out of 182. Either him or I wrote the fix, which is a pretty detailed daily fantasy baseball preview. So, needless to say, I am very excited for this next month with only football, that being weekly, just to catch up on some sleep and relax a little bit. But I'm sure before long I'll be itching for more baseball.
You play some basketball, right?
Yeah, I do play basketball.
Is that like a daily thing for you?
Uh, yeah, pretty. It's gonna be daily this year.
Very nice.
I'm gonna play pretty much every night I can.
Awesome. I know that you have a pretty good with if you have Drew kind of guiding you.
Yeah, I have the best basketball
Yeah,
mentor, so I'm
I
pretty
wish
lucky
I
there.
wish he was my basketball mentor. I mean, that's how I'm a little bit
He's
jealous.
he's brilliant.
Well, I mean, brilliant.
He's good though. I mean, that's actually how I got into daily fantasy sports. I was, asking Drew one day on GChat, for NBA help, and took off from there.
Yeah, like basically you guys, because that's right, because you wrote for Fantistics together.
Yeah, so I knew Drew from Fantistics, and I was like, oh man, this draft street thing's really cool, but I don't really know too much about the NBA. So I started asking him for help, and then we, started making spreadsheets that we were sending back and forth, and one thing led to another, and we got all nerded out with the DFS scene, and
No.
I got hooked.
Let's talk about let's talk about where kind of some people went wrong this week with some of the bust that happened.
Yeah, if we're looking at busts, we already kind of talked about Jason Witten. I'm not really sure what went wrong there. I had a rough go with tight ends. I had a big hit with Tony Gonzalez, but Jason Witten let me down, and I couldn't get away from Brandon Myers' cheap price on FanDuel because it let me do some other things I wanted to, and that crushed me. Threw up a goose egg. So I didn't get to watch too much of that game. Drew had pointed out to me they might have to keep him in a block with their O line in shambles. I'm not sure if that's what happened, but that went poorly. And then if you look at some of the running back busts, we had Darren McFadden, Chris Johnson, Alfred Morris. These guys really hurt you. And as I was saying to you as we were kind of preparing for the show, if you look around at the leaders of qualifiers, like the top 10 and stuff of that nature, you notice there's not an incredible amount of overlap. So it's not like you must have like two or three players. It's more avoiding these busts, having a few guys go off and solid players elsewhere. So more so than there being must-have players in DFS NFL, like there often is in DFS NBA, this is more finding.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. The same thing is true with NBA. Really, is making sure you don't have any busts in your lineup. And I feel like it's like NBA, then NFL, and then baseball. Like you can have one bust, even if he's a high price guy, and have another low price guy just kind of go off. So it doesn't hurt you as much in baseball, unless we're talking about the pitcher, of course. So those hitter positions, though, it doesn't hurt you as much. So you couldn't be too bad on basically some of these positions. Let's go to these busts right here. You've got Witten and Myers, the tight end position. We talked about Witten and also about Myers. I played Eli. You have Deshaun Jackson, Broyles, and A.J. Green. I put A. Green up there. My bad. But all three of those wide receivers, people were kind of high on, especially the first two. I mean, Green is kind of like one of those stud plays that you think like you can't go wrong. But you have Deshaun Jackson in a game that was supposed to be high scoring, and the Eagles just didn't get a whole lot done. LaShawn McCoy, another guy that was pretty big bust as far as what you thought
Yeah.
he might do. Let's just face it, the Broncos have a really good team. They're going to be scary good when they get Von Miller back.
Yeah, that's insane, and it's tough to tell what to do with them in DFS as their salaries just keep rising because there's so many guys and they all produce. You could have thrown out a team of Manning and his four wide receivers and still had an okay day. Usually that's something that would be crazy to even consider. You could have thrown Manning, four receivers, and the running back, and you would have been all right. And they play Jacksonville this weekend. I mean, how do they not score 40-plus points? So it's tough because you know there's going to be production there, but it's going to come at a really high cost, at least on sites where the prices jump around a bit more and the opponent is taken into account.
Yeah, that Broyles pick was brutal, too, because a lot of people thought with Burleson being out that Broyles was a very much value play, salary cap relief guy that would let you play some other guys, and he burned a lot of people, and it kind of gets me wondering about either his value, like with that ACL, or if they brought in Josh Gordon. I don't know. I mean, I saw a lot of people playing Broyles for salary cap relief, thinking that he would provide similar value to what Terrence Williams did for the Cowboys, and it just did not pan out that way. As far as go ahead.
Those guys kind of scare me for main teams, double ups. Even Terrence Williams, he ended up working out. But, I mean, depending on your site, there were enough value plays where I think you didn't need to take those risks. So, luckily, I avoided the bust there with, Antonio Brown and Decker relatively cheap on some sites. And then,
FanDuel especially.
Draft Street, there's a lot of it. Huh?
FanDuel especially for Antonio Brown and Decker.
Yeah, he and Decker were both 6,500 on FanDuel. On Draft Street, you had Dwayne Bowe at sub 7K. I mean, granted, he's got a low floor too, as we saw 2 weeks ago. You had Andre Johnson and Larry Fitzgerald sub 9K. So, I think those cheap receivers can be fool's gold sometimes. Yeah. It's just so hit or miss, and I prefer to keep them in the GPP section and only use them in main teams if I'm very certain of the targets.
And that's what we talked about the not overthinking a thing earlier, is that especially for main teams, there on most sites you could play a decent squad without really having to really dip into the sexy play for the day. So a guy like Powell at running back on FanDuel, Dan was right in saying he would be between 40 and 50% owned, but I was also right because I said it would be under 40, and it was on most places. But the 109 qualifier, he was almost 50% owned at 4,700. That's a guy that's not as big of a risk, especially with the way running backs have been this past year. I mean, running backs this year they've just burned a lot of people. It's been the wide receivers that are the consistent players. I went with Forte and Charles on most places last night that I could, and it ended up working out. It just seems like other guys, even you had Run DMC got hurt. Props to Dink for calling that. You had DeMarco Murray wasn't as good as we thought he was going to be, so that was an issue. Alfred Morris, Doug Martin. Doug Martin had 45 yards on 27 carries. Chris Johnson, he's always a boomer bust guy, but he was
terrible.
He just didn't look he was hitting the hole. and he was just dancing around. And the Titans look like they are much more comfortable in pass protection than in run block. So they were giving, with the exception of that play that Jake Locker almost broke his hip, they were giving the quarterback a lot of time to throw, and you saw them really kind of chew up that Jets defense. A lot of people thought that the Jets defense was going to be a good play, and it turned out it was the Titans defense and the Colts defense that was the huge
Yeah,
play.
that the Jets defense versus the Colts defense on FanDuel could have completely swung your day. I mean, it was, I think, a 20-point swing for defense at the exact same price.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. And you had these defenses and kickers. The Steelers and wait, did you have the Titans as a bust?
It was supposed to be Jets. I must
It's okay. We'll go off real
have
quick.
missed.
We'll go off that shot. But yeah, we had we had the Steelers and the Jets that were kind of bust, and you had a lot of the defenses that provided more value than those Jets and Steelers, and also kickers. You had a lot of field goals yesterday. It just seems like there are a lot of matches being decided by defenses and kickers, and I know that most daily players think that that's a shame, especially if it's happening to you.
Yeah, I absolutely hate that. I mean, even on Draft Street, even though it worked out for me that I was right with the Chiefs defense, if you look at the Chiefs defense versus the Steelers, that's a 24-point swing, which I don't know if there should be that much effect of a defense on a daily game. If you think about that, a 24-point swing on defenses is the equivalent of a 300-yard quarterback with 2 touchdowns, right? I mean, what's that, 4, 12? Yeah, that's 20 points. So, I mean, should it carry that much weight? I don't think so. I think either the scoring should be lower so it doesn't have as much of an effect, or we got to give props to Star Street. They just only site that completely scrap both kickers and defenses, which for me makes me very happy. That's one of the reasons I like playing there. Let's get these fluky pick sixes. I mean, a fluky pick six is what, 8 points on most sites, and even I don't know. I just am not a fan of having so much impact on the DFS world.
Yeah, and like you said, props to Star Street because I mean, would you rather play two extra position players, like two extra flex players, or play a defense and a special team? I know that I would rather play the players, and I mean, there's just so much unpredictability in the special teams and defense, and even the kickers. It's just such a toss up, and yeah,
There is some, skill into picking a defense and taking into consideration the salary and the price. But kicker, I mean, on a week-to-week basis, even on a year-to-year basis, you don't necessarily know who's the best kickers are going to be, let alone figuring out, value per salary for a weekly DFS game.
yeah, and you know, as far as here, can you hear me right now? Okay.
Yes.
As far as the players, you want to, like DFS players, you don't want to miss out on a big trip because of Vegas or because not because of Vegas, because of a kicker or because of a defense. There's a guy right now looming in the 109 qualifier on FanDuel, and he's like 8 points behind, and he needs like Hartley and the Saints defense to do something so he can get. I mean, I fully expect him to get those 8 points and win. And if you're that guy in first place, it's gonna suck seeing a defense and a special teams and kicker basically pass you. There's nothing worse than sweating a defense. That's what or kicker. Yeah, it's very crazy. We have basically 15 minutes till kickoff. Let's go over some of the foils, starting with Le'Veon Bell, a guy that kind of foiled Roethlisberger's production. You feel like?
Yeah, absolutely. Because going into this game, if you're looking at the data for the Minnesota Vikings, they were giving up a ton of pass attempts in the red zone. So you would think, Roethlisberger's got a really good chance at a multi-TD game, and he moved the ball. He was, I think, over 300 yards passing, but Bell snuck in with those 2 rushing touchdowns, and then you also had Roethlisberger get sacked at the end of the game in the red zone to end the game. So that was, tough to swallow as a Roethlisberger owner. He ended up with an okay game, but it could have been a great game. I'm getting CB35, says no sound from me.
Hmm.
Oh, he says I'm good now.
Now you're good. Thank you, CB35. I think it was because whenever it's on me, you can't hear me, but when it's on you, you can hear me. So like you can't hear you right now, but now you can hear you. But yeah, let's getting back to the foils. That Bell, like I feel like I was the guy that kind of said he might be like not to play him basically at least for this first game. I just didn't believe he had the offensive line. Didn't think he would get the opportunities. And if you played him, especially on Draft Street, you had a pretty good squad.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I mean, their whole line run blocking's been terrible, so that's another reason why you think they wouldn't be able to throw in the red zone. But on Draft Street, he was a comparable price to C.J. Spiller, who a lot of people played. So if you were a little bit contrarian and went with Bell, you got 3 times as many points for the same salary. Put you in great position.
Yeah. You have also the Colts red zone passing. They really screwed your Trent Richardson plays.
Yeah, I mean, Trent Richardson deserves some blame because, I mean, we're getting to the point where he deserves some criticism for that consistently low yards per carry. But I think at one point the Colts got down to the 4 yard line and threw 3 straight times and settled for a field goal. Another, you see Reggie Wayne had a 5 yard touchdown on the box score. And this was the type of game where you really felt they would just pound it with the run, play it safe against a poor opponent. And you were expecting, really hoping for a multiple TD game out of T Rich, and that Colts scheme in the red zone really was a foil for those T Rich owners such as myself.
Yeah, definitely. You've got Manning missing Decker, and then also Lions secondary receivers. Which one of those hurt you the most?
Well, for me personally, which is why it's such a specific foil in there, was the Decker touchdown, because I was watching that and I was so mad. It was such a great play, and he was burnt the cornerback. I forgot which cornerback it was on a double move, and that's a throw that Peyton doesn't miss very often. And he just overthrew him, and it went off his fingertips. Would have easily been an 80-yard touchdown, and that play alone would have been worth more fantasy points than he ended up getting on the day. So for me, that hurt me more. But for the people that started Reggie Bush and Calvin Johnson, who had good games, especially Reggie Bush, but I just think about how much more their ceiling would have been if we didn't see, 7 catches out of Brandon Pettigrew, which, if I had to guess, I would say that was more than the first 3 games combined, or at least close to the same amount. And another, I think, what was it, 4 catches from Durham. And then you had Bush and Calvin, they each only got 4 catches, so 8 combined for them. Their ceiling would have been much higher had they received more targets.
Yeah, checking the internet connection right now to make sure that I have a solid internet connection.
Okay.
Because it says either that or something is up with the server. I think it might be my internet though.
Should I be checking something,
No,
or
no, no. It's actually my internet is fine. No, it seems like we're getting pockets of stuff. I don't know. Anyways, we'll just power through. We only have about 10 more minutes. Yeah, my upload speed is good. Okay. It must be our server. We'll get our trusty handyman Steve on the task because there's also more than a 4 second delay, which is how it normally is. It's only normally 4 seconds, and I'm looking, and it's a lot more than that. And I see Papa says maybe if we move the rabbit ears toward the south. True that.
Oh, and I'm just sorry. What was that?
Go for it.
Oh, I was just looking at a couple more qualifiers. The Fantasy Feud 109 and the DraftKings, which isn't a qualifier, but actually it is a qualifier and a GPP. Alshon Jeffrey seems like he was a huge piece
Oh
to
yeah.
the teams that were going to take those down. He was only 1.9% owned on DraftKings. I can't see what his salary was, but he came up with 29.4 points in that format, which I'm assuming he was pretty cheap because the guy was able to fit in, Peyton Manning, Demaryius Thomas, Jamal Charles, along with him. Just a monster roster this guy put together.
Yeah, I noticed on Draft Street the key to a lot of people's lineups. It seems like all the top lineups had one guy in common. That was Arian Foster and Terrence Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Terrence Williams was another guy. They gave him salary cap relief, but Arian Foster, I didn't even realize he was under 9,000. To be honest.
Yeah, that's why you always got to check the salaries. He wasn't somebody I was high on by any means. I did have him as a favorited, GPP play for our Draft Street cheat sheets through our website, and that's just based on price and volume. Obviously, the matchup wasn't good, but anytime you get a guy, especially running back, who's your main red zone threat and catches out of the backfield, even with the presence of Tate, for under 9K, that's worth a shot in a GPP. I'm not sure I would have taken him on a main team just because you're going up against the Seahawks, you could get completely shut down. But that was huge. And as I said before, with Spiller and there was another cheap running back.
Was pretty cheap. Ryan Matthews was cheap.
MJD, Matthews. David Wilson was another cheap guy that those guys didn't really produce too much. So if you got the correct cheap running back, Le'Veon Bell, Foster, you were in great shape because the receivers kind of went more as expected. I guess the top running backs outside of McCoy performed well, but the receivers, I came into the day thinking Demaryius Thomas and Dez Bryant were both phenomenal plays, and I couldn't fit them both in, and I also had the wrong cheap running backs anyway. So, had I been on the Bell Foster train, I would have had both those receivers, and that would have been fun.
Do you play the what if game? Do you ever go back and look and see what if I would have done this and that? How much could I have won?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a dangerous game, but I think everyone
you have
does
to be realistic with yourself. I get mad when it's like a late decision I switch, or if it's something I just missed because I wasn't diligent enough with digging through the salaries. But sometimes it's just fun to be like, oh man, if I started Foster and Le'Veon Bell, which, in my case, I just wasn't on those guys, at least not for a main team. It is fun to play the what if game because then you can convince yourself that, you absolutely nailed it. You just made the wrong one decision or so.
Papa Cub says he does that with browsers. I don't even know what that means.
I'm afraid to ask.
I'm trying to pull up my, basically my Star Street games in the Star Street Elite. Let's see if we can pull this up. You'll see that I basically need to fade Jimmy Graham because I am currently in third. Condia is, I know he's going to surpass me because he has Pierre Thomas and he's a point behind me. And then
Condia had a huge week for the second week in a row. It looked like just from scoreboard watching.
this is 2 weeks in a row where he has absolutely crushed it. I mean, he
Hmm.
kind of said last year, he put on his blog that he didn't have a very good year, or I guess, up to Condi's standards from the year before. But so far, 2 out of 4 weeks, he just hasn't been like profitable like in all his like head-to-head matchups. He's been near the top of all these qualifiers. So, I mean, I can only imagine with him being at the top for Star Street, Draft Street, and FanDuel, there's no telling what he has pulled in.
Yeah,
Someone
it's gotta
said
be
six
insane.
figures last week. Someone told me six figures.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the volume he plays in. He's not just above average so that he's picking up value in double ups and head to head games. I mean, he's cashing GPPs on top of sweeping all those double up games and the majority of those head to head games.
Yeah. I've got Jimmy Graham, who can't score more than 13 points.
See, we have a subscriber, John Haskell, Syracuse Slapper, in the 109 Star Street qualifier. He needs, I think it's 12 points out of Jimmy Graham. So let's say he gets 12 and a half,
Yeah.
and he's happy, and you're happy,
I,
and I'd be happy because I'm bubbling on the Star Street double up, so I really need Jimmy Graham to just like not go off. I need a sub 20 point performance.
as far as the pick five, I pulled it up earlier. I need Lamar Miller to outscore Stephen Ridley by basically he needs 10 points, and I need Mike Wallace to get 6 points, and then I need Jimmy Graham to get under 16 points and not pass Julio Jones, and I will have the perfect pick five. So we'll see. There's a lot of different ways that the sweats could go tonight. It's going to be fun to see because I mean, like we talked about, like you just look from the Saints' perspective. They got Breeze. I know that Drew was really high on Breeze, especially in Draft Street, where his price went down. Then you got the two running
Mm-hmm.
backs, Sproles and Pierre Thomas. Then you have Colston, and then you have Jimmy Graham, of course. And then a lot of people played Kenny Stills for cap space.
Yeah, I did in the $22 3,000 person qualifiers in Draft Street, just giving myself some upside salary cap relief.
So that basically means any sort of offense from the Saints, people are going to be gaining or losing stuff. If you don't have any players left over, it's like you don't even want to turn on the TV because
Oh, it's
you're
scary.
just going to see money slipping away. But then on the opposite side, I've seen some Charles Clay plays.
Yeah, I think, with the total being 50 and the Dolphins not being too highly priced, you see some Tannehill, Mike Wallace, Clay, even a Heartline here and there mixed in. I mean, at a much lower percentage than the Saints guys, but there's still some money to be made or lost based on what the Dolphins do.
Yeah. Someone said that Condia was really high on Daniel Thomas this week too. So that would be an interesting play if Thomas got to vulture a couple of goal line carries. But
Hmm.
there's just a lot of players playing tonight. It's good for fantasy football people that still have them playing, and if you don't have them playing, it's going to really hard to it's going to be hard to enjoy the game. You might because it always
Yeah,
sucks rooting against something. You'd rather be rooting for something. Um, uh,
unless it's Colin Kaepernick against the
right,
Seahawks.
but still, you knew that you had a chance. I would rather be rooting from behind than in front.
Yeah, especially because if you're in front and you're rooting this whole time and everything's going your way, and then all of a sudden one play you could lose it and that's it. Once you've lost it, you're done. I mean, barring a site with severe on turnover negatives, once the lead's gone, it's
Yeah.
over. So it's pretty deflating. At least when you're coming from behind, like you said, you've got a chance the whole time. If it doesn't work out the way you want it to, that sucks. But at least you had I think, a more enjoyable experience.
For sure. I mean, it's like we can ask Dink of his nightmare of a sweat that one night where he jumped out
Oh
ahead.
my
I was
god.
lucky enough to hold on to one, but that about killed me. I mean, when you don't have any more control and you're just watching the lead slip away, you really feel pretty helpless. What can you do though? This is the daily fantasy sports world that we live in, and let's be honest, it's a good world overall. So,
It's a great world.
anyways, Mike, I really appreciate you joining me. Sorry for the server issues. We'll get that squared away. We'll get that taken care.
Papa thinks it's the government
It could
shutdown
be.
threat.
I saw a tweet tonight that said that someone said they were looking forward to the finale, the season finale of the government tonight. So we'll see how the government shutdown has any effect on us at all. Speaking of the government, there are also, if you were, I was actually talking to a guy tailgating at the Vandy game on Saturday, and he was talking about how he wanted to get into full tilt, or he wanted to get into not full tilt. He wanted to get into daily fantasy sports, and he actually was playing a lot of poker with full tilt, and they still had like $4,000 of his money. And then I found out later that there's actually a government kind of controlled website where you go in and you kind of claim your losses. So if you're out there and you have any full tilt losses where you couldn't cash out, make sure you go there and try to get something. I know a lot of people are trying to get that balance kind of put back on in their daily fantasy account. That'd be pretty sweet if you just like also it's like someone writing you a $2,000, $3,000 check and just say, "Hey, go play some daily fantasy with this."
Yeah, I've still got I don't know if you know AFFL, American Fantasy Football
Yeah,
League. They owe me like $1,000, and if I ever see that check, it'll just feel like free money at this point.
exactly. That's what I'm saying. So I mean, it's going to be like you said, free money. Anyways, thanks for joining us, everybody. Tomorrow, Mr. Tuttle and I will have a podcast, and we'll be talking a little bit about the overthinking it. We'll be going over the day's winners and losers, and we'll be looking forward to the upcoming week, talking a little bit about the industry. So it should be fun. Really appreciate you sticking around, and if you have someone in your matchup tonight going for you, we wish you all the luck in the world. If you have someone going against you, we hope they get terribly injured. Right, Michael?
Um, I'm not gonna be as venomous as you. Let's just
No.
hope that they.
Okay. That was a test. You passed. I was going to see if you were going to be as evil as.
I'm not gonna be, your blind yes man and wish voodoo
Right.
dirty
Right.
magic upon Jimmy
Right.
Graham.
We just no, and Jimmy Graham's on my season-long team too, which I'm beating Natural Slugger. By the way, happy 30th birthday, Natural Slugger today. But I'm beating him with Jimmy Graham. Everything else is just kind of icing on the cake. But no, I mean if you're playing against a player playing and you don't have anybody playing, all we're talking about is like just a minor injury. We're talking about like stomach
Yeah,
cramps,
like
right?
yeah. Oh, yeah. And then he's fine for the next week. But we don't need any heroes on Monday night when you're out of bullets and everyone else is got one of the highest powered offenses in the game. It's a pretty scary position to be in if you don't have anyone left. I think the only person I have is Breeze on Draft Street. So I'm with you, Dave, and seriously sweating Jimmy Graham.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, guys, for tuning in. And we don't have any music for you because my iPad's dead. But next time we will have the final countdown music because it's a perfect segue into what we're doing. So, anyways, this has been the Monday Night Sweats. We'll holler at you later.
See ya.
Well, something is wrong with our server or this program because I kept on getting notices that said